Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Force of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay at tenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng kwela. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugod, todo sa kayod, tulong at tulong. Lipat na Blue Eagle, galing giting nagigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan.
Tara na't simulan ng inyong umaga sa mga magagandang refleksyon tungkol sa ating buhay at pananampalataya. Kasama sina Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, Father J. Boy Gonzales at Father Nono Alfonso ng Kapisanan ni Jesus, Father Cali Llamado ng Manila Cathedral at Binibining Risa Singson Kaupeng ng Light of Jesus Community dito sa Kapit Pandasal sa Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Gutom ka ba? Ako si Risa Singson Kaupeng, Editor-in-Chief ng Kirigma Magazine. Magkapit pandasal muna tayo. Napakadaming pagpipilian kapag pagkain ang pinag-uusapan. Depende sa panlasa mo, pananabik mo at budget mo, siguradong may mahahanap na makakain na swak sa gusto mo. Pero sa dami ng mapagpipilian, ang tanong ay, ano ang mabuti sa iyong kalusugan? Nung ako'y bata pa, ipinagbabawal ni Mami na kami kumain ng candy o kung ano-ano kapag malapit na ang tanghalian o hapunan. Mawawalan ka ng gana pagdating ng tamang oras ng kainan, sabi niya. At tama nga siya. Kapag pumapapak tayo ng junk food imbis na kumain ng masustansyang pagkain, di na tayo makakakain ng tama. Nawawala ng lugar ang mga pagkain na nakakapagpalakas at nagpapapagaling sa ating katawan. Ganyan din sa ating buhay espiritual. Napakadaming alok ng mundo sa atin na panandali ang binubusog tayo o nagbibigay kasiyahan. Ang pagnanasa ng laman, ang pagnanasa ng mga mata, at ang pagmamalaki sa buhay na ito ay nakakaaliw sa umpisa, ngunit pagkabigo lamang ang dulot sa atin sa huli. Kaibigan, si Jesus lamang ang kayang magpuno ng pagnanasa ng ating espiritu at kaluluwa. Hangarin nating makilala at mabusog ng kaalaman tungkol kay Kristo. Tayo magdasal. Jesus, Ikaw ang tinapay na nagbibigay buhay. Punuin niyo ang bawat sulok ng buhay ko. Amen.
Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay at tenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng pera. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugod, todo sa kayod, tulong at tulong.
Palalimin ang kamalayan sa mga isyong napapanahon. Makisangkot at makiisa kasama ang Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan, ang socio-political apostolate ng Kapisanan ni Jesus. Ito ang Kuwentuhang Bayan mula alas 11 ng umaga tuwing Biyernes dito lang sa Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. Dahil naniniwala kami na posible ang isang mas mabuting lipunan at maaari itong simulan sa isang kwentuhan.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Welcome to another Friday episode dito sa Radyo Katipunan. Muli ako po si John Warren Varquez at kasama ko po ngayon ang ating Associate Director for Programs ng Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan at former basta Carlo Abadines, no? And later mag-join din sa atin ngayon si Program Director ng Taratakbo, si Razel Morales. Muli, ito po ang Kwentuhang Bayan dito sa Radyo Katipunan. Good morning everyone, mga Katipunero at Katipunera. Hi Carlo, hi Raz.
Hello, magandang umaga din, no, sa lahat ng mga nakikinig, no. And unang kumustahan muna. Sana okay naman din kayo sa mga nakikinig ngayon, no? And medyo okay naman yung mga balita this week at mamaya mapapag-usapan din natin, no? Pero ramdam na natin ang Christmas season kasi legit, no? December na, no? So sana po kasi iniisip ko parang wala pa ata ako budget, baka hindi ako magbibigay ng gifts this year. Ganun na lang. Gift of presents.
Tatanungin ka sana, kumusta yung mga projects last year sa DPWH?
Kainis.
Hi Carlo, kumusta naman yung ating budget ngayon as former DPWH secretary? Yeah, kumusta naman kumusta ba yung week na to? So medyo yeah, tama yung sinabi mo, dama-dama ko na yung Christmas, no? Actually, di ba for November parang yung usually yung pinaghahandaan is yung ating celebration in terms of November 1, no? Yung October, for example, no? And of course, for this December, no, excited na ako for Christmas, for Simbang Gabi, no? For Simbang Gabi to start December 16, no? Pero of course, December 16 is not, hindi siya nice for me to remember kasi yun yung time na nagkaroon kami ng Odette doon sa amin. No? Like, it's also the first day of my work in SLB, and then that first day, nagkaroon ng traumatic experience doon sa doon sa amin sa Lobok Bohol, no. So yun, Carlo, how's your week by the way?
Well, okay naman. May tinatapos lang kaming mga reports din and studies, no? Pero very enlightening at madaming natututunan. And actually, no, parang habang pinapag-usapan ngayong December, no, medyo season talaga siya na kailangan mo i-push yung sarili mo, no, na magtrabaho kasi alam mo yan, di ba, may kailangan tapusin in a sense, no, end of year. Pero marami ding mga tao ngayon nasa holiday mood, di ba? And I think medyo iba yun yung But ako siguro, heading towards the finals na din ng mga estudyante, no? So, it's been an interesting experience yung mga papers na sinusulat ng mga estudyante ko, no? Parang binabasa ko na at medyo masaya naman ako. Mukhang may natutunan pala sila sa klase ko. Ganun pala yung mga feeling, no?
Yes, speaking of tawag dito, students, share ko lang para kasi di ba sabi ko na yung mga ginagawa natin in Kuwentuhang Bayan, in-apply ko in one of my classes, at least 2, 3. Basta may mga sessions. Hi Raz! No, wow, ganda-ganda naman ganda-ganda naman ng ating Greet ka muna sa ating mga nanonood.
Hi, good morning everyone. Magandang umaga. I've been listening sa chikanin niyo, umaga. I miss you, Warren.
Yeah.
So nice seeing you here.
Labas tayo bago ako umuwi ng Bohol. Charot. No. So yun, share ko lang na kasi ngayon, discussion namin is about Kingdom of God. Wow, Kingdom of God, no? Kingdom of God. Kasi CST, di ba nga tinuturo? So Kingdom of God. Tapos, one of the activities, yung visioning activity natin, ginagawa ko siya dun sa sa ating Kuwentuhang Bayan sa klase. No? And then sabi ko, tapos tinanong nila ako, so sir, ano ba yung vision niyo? No? Pinapatanong niya. Ang vision ko I was quoting Father Pat na sana poverty will just be in the museums, na hindi na siya madadama ng mga tao, but it will just be an artifact in the museums. Tapos tapos yung mga students ko pumalakpak. Bakit kayo pumalakpak? Para akong nanalo sa Miss Universe dito kasi pinapalakpakan niyo ako. So yun yung sa kanila, no? Anyhow, no? Sige, so thank you for being with us ngayon, Raz, no? Actually, isa sa mga topics natin ngayon, we really need your insights, no, regarding sa isa sa mga topics na pag-usapan natin ngayon, no. So yun, 'di ba? Of course, sorry, parang nawawala yan. Okay, sige. So let's start, no. Chikahan muna tayo. Bale, ito na yung gagawin natin. We will just read, no. I mean not read. We will share our thoughts, no, regarding ano yung mga major issues na nangyari for the past week, no, at least from last Thursday to this Thursday, yung pag-usapan natin. And of course, mga Marisis tayo ngayon. So welcome to the Club of Marisis, no? Marites with analysis, no? So we'll try to share, no, yung insights natin dito, ano yung mga experiences natin with this one, no? So ganyang mga bagay, no? So isa sa mga pag-usapan natin ngayon is about development and inequality. So ano ba ibig sabihin nito, no? It actually is dalawang bagay ito. It actually brings us into two things. Una, it talks about a development. No, let's talk first about development. No, House passes bill strengthening anti-discrimination law for women workers. No, so ito yung kanyang headline. No, so the chamber voting 248 votes. Approved House Bill number 479, which amends Article 135 of Presidential Decree 442 or Labor Code of the Philippines, which lists acts of discrimination prohibited. No? So the bill seeks to strengthen the anti-discrimination provisions of the law by providing that it shall be unlawful for an employer to discriminate against women employee with respect to terms and conditions of employment solely on account of her sex or characteristics of her sex, whether actual or presumed. No? So ito, meron silang identify na mga acts of discrimination. And I want you to share sana kung ano yung mga thoughts nyo dito. No? Payment of a lesser compensation due to because of her sexuality, no, or characteristics of her sex, no, including wage, salary, or other form of remuneration and fringe benefits to a female employee against a male employee for work or equal value. So ibig sabihin, pareho yung work pero konti lang yung benefits na tatanggap ng isang woman na employee, no, so yun, discrimination. So in terms of employment, now favoring a male employee over a female employee with respect to assignment of promotion, employment benefits, etc. And another thing, in terms of recruitment, no, favoring a male employee over a female employee with respect of dismissal of personnel or the application of any retrenchment policy of the employer solely on the account of their sex or characteristics of their sex. What are your thoughts of this? No, I mean, what are your thoughts about this, Carlo and Raz? No, do you think is this a good development? Is this, ano ba ito? Parang meron pa ba sanang in-expect natin na mangyari dito or anything? No, ano yung thoughts niya dito?
Yeah. Ako na muna, and then I think RM would be able to give a better opinion, no? Especially as a woman and in this world, no. But I guess on the overall scale of things, no, there were really reports, no, when we talk about economic development, no, in general, meron talaga inequalities, no. For sure, there are really sectors that are more affected than others when it comes to things like employment. For example, when the pandemic happened, I'm sure, no, the people who were affected in terms of employment, yung mga vulnerable, like young people, for example, is a vulnerable sector. Women no? Usually yun yung mga nauuna, no? Na natatanggal. And it's really because of many different issues, no? For example, for women, I know na nagiging concern for employers yung pwede sila bigyan ng maternity leave. Yung mga ganun, di ba? And in a sense, babayaran yung employee, but theoretically the employee is not working, no? And that becomes parang in a sense, no, the justification of an employer not to hire, no, women, no, for that. And there really is, it's very clear na even if we talk about yun, yung mga paggawa ng trabaho, development, may naiiwan, no, and there's really inequality, especially against women, no. Mechanisms like this, no, yung pag ano ng mga batas na ganito, it's really to equal, no. Para siyang ano ano yung mga ano yung tawag dun sa klaseng batas na yun? Parang corrective mechanism siya, no? You legislate such laws so that you kind of try to correct the cultural and
Practices.
societal inequalities. Parang corrective mechanism siya,
Oo.
no? And honestly, ako I'm totally pro it, 'di ba? Parang kung naiintindihan natin na ito yung sitwasyon ng mga kababaihan when it comes to employment, then we should support, no, such legislation, no. And consistent naman siguro siya sa prinsipyo natin sa simbahan, no. When we talk about preferential option for the poor, hindi naman talaga siya necessarily lang the poor, no, but I think the preferential option is preferential option for those who are being marginalized, being oppressed in different ways, no. And I think in a sense the church should stand also personally, no. I think that's really the movement that we should enter into.
Ano nga ba? I think diba yung simbahan, it's not actually more focusing on the poor lang, but the LLL, the last, the least, and the lost, diba? Yun yung ano, wow, LLL. Okay, so RM, any thoughts, no?
Sige. Dugtungan ko lang yung sinabi ni Carlo, no? Regarding also policies, kasi tama siya. Nung sinabi niya, these are corrective mechanisms or affirmative action actually is usually the term that we use, no? Affirmative action as a corrective mechanism. Pero tingnan muna natin, himayin natin kung saan tayo ngayon para alam natin kung saan tayo papunta. Why do we need this corrective action? Why do we need this affirmative action? So kung makikita din natin kung bakit kino-consider na vulnerable or marginalized yung mga kababaihan or children at risk and other sectors, no, usually, especially when we talk about structural inequality, those who are poor, diba? Yung sabi nyo, the least, the lost, and ano yung sabi mo, Warren, kanina?
The last, the least, and the lost.
Yes, the last, the least, and the lost. There you go. Is, kung titingnan natin, tama na may preference ngayon talaga. Usually, pag pinag-usapan natin sa labor frameworks natin and development frameworks natin, na yung mas nagbibigay or mas more output. So, output-oriented tayo kesa process-oriented. So, usually, nagfo-fall kasi yung different kinds of labor, yung mga subliminal labor, yung mga hindi masyadong nakikita na labor on women and other vulnerable sectors. That includes emotional labor, yung pagproseso ng emosyon natin para hindi natin siya ipasa sa coworkers natin and other nakasama natin sa community, no? Care work, yung pag-care sa tao, which is connected pag pinag-usapin natin yung emotional labor, no? And usually, nagpo-fall kasi siya sa proseso. Pinoprocess natin yung isang bagay. And usually, that falls for what? The vulnerable and marginalized sector, rather than those who are already in power, those who are majority in the position of power. And aminin naman natin, most of that is men, and let's give credit to them for that, no. Pero kung titingnan kasi din natin, balik tayo sa development framework natin, no. Kung sino yung nasa posisyon, siya yung nagsiset ng development framework natin. Siya nagsiset ng standard ng kung paano natin gawin yung mga bagay-bagay. And kailangan din natin i-consider na since konti siguro yung mga women, hindi siguro. Actually, there's data that shows that konti naman talaga yung mga vulnerable sectors that have access to those decision-making table or processes in our society, no? Yung nagiging paningin natin sa a lot of development frameworks natin is base din sa paningin nung nasa posisyon, which is, as mentioned, majority men nga. So, I think personally, as I think you invited me here as part of the least, the lost. And
Ay, hindi naman.
hindi naman. Okay. Uh, and I think talaga na I'm for this affirmative action nga. At hindi lang kasi siya limited lang sa batas. Of course, the law also sets the precedents. Or yung kung ano yung nasa batas, yun yung susundin ng lahat halos, 'di ba? So I'm for this affirmative action or corrective mechanism that's happening right now in the halls of power natin sa sa legis.
Yeah, actually I remembered na isang beses nung nagtaratakburan tayo, 'di ba, in Cavite? Yeah, Cavite. Tapos nakatutok yung aircon sa atin. Tapos sabi mo sa akin, alam mo, John, yung aircon is actually, parang sabi niya, anti-women. Kasi you men, parang when you work in a cool environment, parang lumalabas yung energy or parang gumagana yung utak. But for us women, if we work in a cold environment, nanghihina kami or parang, anong term na, parang nawawalan kami ng energy. Am I saying it right, di ba? So parang sabi ko, so technically yung cool space in a work environment is actually pro man rather than pro women. So parang yun yung ano mo. So parang sabi ko, no, parang pero bakit parang feeling ko nanghihina din ako pag nasa aircon. Charot. Yun lang.
Nako. Alam mo, interesting yun, no? And I think hanging out with RM and everything, parang I think kailangan talaga nagiging conscious tayo sa mga ganitong bagay. I mean, typically, no, the world is coming from a very, I would say, patriarchal, no? A very male-centered lens, no? Whether it be in decision making, whether it be in terms of processes, medyo ganun talaga, no? Yung pinagdadaanan, usually how power structures are in organizations, no? And I think things like this, affirmative action to protect women is critical. But I think another dimension to it is really when it comes to cultural shifts, no? 'Di ba? Parang etong mga affirmative action na to, these are very formal institutional arrangements, no? You create a law to protect people, no? In that sense. Pero I think what is more necessary, and what is equally necessary, I think, is a value shift, yeah? A cultural shift, no? Saying that women are actually as competent or even more competent than men in terms of many things, no? In terms of tasks. And I think yun yung medyo nakaka-frustrate. Because I remember before, yung nanay ko, no? So she's the one who's like the breadwinner sa family namin. And she always mentions that there is really a glass ceiling in terms of corporate, as in talagang meron talagang weird barrier na hindi kayang basagin, no? And that weird barrier prevents, no, women from entering into higher positions of decision making, no? So that's one. Second, tama yung nakalagay doon about yung wages, no? My mom used to go home very stressed. I think she was doing like work for two people, no? And she was only getting paid as if isang tao lang siya. As in, yun yung nangyayari, di ba? And it's just, and part of it might have been because she was in a sense a woman, no? And the wages that was not given to her in proper ways, no? And I think that's very frustrating, di ba? Kung naririnig kayong gano'n na bagay, na parang bakit gano'n, di ba? Parang I know many more women who are more competent than I am, di ba? And yet, di ba, there's a struggle in terms of getting the right wages also. And I think this is really something na kailangan culturally natin baguhin, di ba? And I don't know how to go about that. Baka si RM my thoughts on how men can help women. Or I don't know how men can be part of this whole cultural shift in the first place, no?
Yeah. Ayun. So, how men can help in this cultural shift? I think the biggest thing that men can actually do, and even those who are in position of power, anyone in position of power, is to listen. I think the more that we quote and quote climb the social ladder, mas bumibigat yung responsibilidad, nakakalimutan din makinig. And that's what we call active listening, not just listening to the words that our communities and our peers are saying, but also the tone of their voice when it cracks. Kasi that shows na mabigat yun para sa kanila. Personally, that's also the case. And nahihirapan ako. I'm trying to compose my thoughts, no? Kasi I've had so many experience na binabanggit natin ngayon, this morning, na hindi ko na alam kung paano ko siya sasabihin in a way na masisynthesize ko siya. Kasi
I was actually going to
parang-
ask that, no? Like, do you have any personal experiences, no? Yung first-hand experiences mismo ng this kind of discrimination in terms of the sexuality.
Yeah. So, nung bata kasi ako, so I grew up in a upper E, lower D household. So, that's a poor household. Yung janitor yung tatay ko nung bata ako. I grew up in a household na kulang yung pagkain. And then, a typhoon struck us when I was in grade 6. I think I was 8.5 years old. May anyhalf kasi bilangan ng edad. Anyway, 8.5 years old. And when the typhoon struck sa community namin, of course, naging bakwet, no? Evacuee. And then, kinailangan naming mag-evacuate, and then in the evacuation center, naramdaman ko talaga na sobrang helpless ko kasi yung mga men also were looking at me in a, like, alam mo yung yung para
Okay,
alam
gets.
mong-
Okay.
gets. So, ayokong sabihin kasi mabigat pa siya para sa akin.
Okay, gets.
Yeah, oo. So, isa lang yon, pero madaming beses din yon nangyari talaga nang paulit-ulit, because after that happened, hindi naman kasi mainstream that time yung mga mental health, di ba? Yung debriefing sa mga debriefing.
Yeah.
Kasi hindi siya yung norm during that time. So, that's the first experience I had. And that happened many times. And of course, that affected my work, which made me twice as much. I needed twice as much time to actually focus. Kasi parang pag may something that reminds me or associates me with that experience, bumabalik ako doon. So kailangan ko huminga at be in the moment. Kasi kailangan ko magtrabaho para sa pamilya ko. Kailangan ko buhayin ang pamilya ko at the end of the day. And that's what we mean by also, care work, cultural processing, yung care work and emotional processing that falls on the vulnerable sector, like women and children. And for sure, that's not just me. Ang dami nating kababaihan. Ang dami nating mga bata also na nababahaan or are in disaster-prone areas, no? So, yun na muna siguro.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of that's a development, no. Let's talk about another form of parang inequality in a sense, no. Well, hindi siya pero inequality talaga siya. So ito siya. There was a remark, no, in one of the human rights hearing by the head, no, Benny Abante, no. Sabi niya, he was referring to Benny Abante is heading now the human rights committee, no, of the House
House of Representatives.
And then House of Representatives, and then sabi niya I was looking for the name. Sabi niya kay Baghari Philippines chairperson Reyna Valmores that ang ganda mo namang transgender. So parang it was some sort of a I don't know if how do I put this, parang um singling out no Miss Reina Valmores. And then sabi ni Valmores, at maganda rin po ang mga kapwa ko rin transgender na nakakaranas ng discrimination ay mapoprotektahan din natin, hindi po ba? So it was actually ito naging headline ito. Why? Because the UP gender law, no, University of the Philippines Gender Law and Policy Program, in giving their report, he was actually highlighting, no, in the conclusion part, the SOGI-based discrimination in the Philippines, no, and then he was stopped, no, or interrupted by Abante. Sabi niya, what pissed me off is that you represent UP and you speak on a certain right of a certain individual that should not be. The anti-discrimination bill is an encompassing right of all. So parang sabi ko, okay, as well, of course, I don't know if actually, to be honest, when I was actually reading the article, no, parang I was a little bit pissed off, no. Of course, every one of us has rights, di ba? Every one of us has rights of, for example, ganyan, meron tayong rights and everything. And then, but there are certain groups who need special attention. There are certain groups who, well, of course, there are certain groups who are uniquely, parang needs certain right in a sense, no? So I don't know what's your thoughts regarding this one, Carlo and RM. But this is actually based on the LGBTQ rights, no? When this issue was actually brought up.
Yeah. Well, I think ang interesting start siguro doon, no? May background talaga yung congressman na yan for having very difficult conservative views, no? And actually, and I think this will connect a bit to our own stances, no, as the faithful. Ano talaga siya, no? They use the church and religion, no, as the basis for creating such gender insensitive, di talaga sensitive, di ba? Gender insensitive na mga comments, no? And I think it's frustrating kasi as the chair of the Human Rights Committee, di ba? Parang you would expect that they would be more in a sense sensitive, no? And aware of creating such comments, no? Understandably, no, church teachings on the thing on such things right now, no, are a bit up in the air, no, up for conversation, and sometimes it can really be very conservative, no. But at the end of the day, we're confronted with a plural society. There are really people coming from very different backgrounds, coming from very different gender leanings, and fundamentally, no, we need to be confronting that reality, no, na kailangan talaga natin alamin at intindihin na may mga sektor na inaapi, no? There really are structural things, no, that are against this sector, di ba? I remember a good friend of mine, no? Wow, good friend. Nagkikwento siya, di ba, na habang daw nag-hire, di ba, may gender, may
Kilala ko ba yung
gender,
friend na yan?
baka kilala mo ata yung friend. But anyway, may kwento, di ba, na talagang hindi hina-hire yung LGBT community. As in, it was a directive, no, on the HR department na huwag mag-hire ng mga tao na galing sa LGBT community. And on top of that pa, parang kailangan daw mag-hire ng mga magagandang babae, di ba? And if you just think about this whole thing, why is this happening, di ba? Parang sobrang frustrating, and it's not as if this is just a small company, right? Based on sa sharing nga, na it's actually a big established company that has such informal hiring. Hindi nga informal, di ko alam kung written document siya, no? But I can imagine, no, na may directive na ganyan sa HR. And you can imagine, di ba, na there are sectors that are clearly, no, sinasabihan sila na bawal ka magtrabaho, no? Not because of your competency, but because of your gender, right? And or your sex, di ba? And I think that becomes really the problem, no? And again, as much as I'm a believer na kailangan ng corrective mechanism sa law, no? That the law plays a very critical role for affirmative action. I still think that it's a cultural shift siya, di ba?
Yeah.
And statements coming from Congressman, for example, Abante, is clearly not helping our culture move forward, no, or our value system move forward in terms of promoting more inclusive policies, less discriminatory policies, no. And so for me, the church, no, it may not be an expert in terms of policy, but I think we do have a concrete voice when it comes to yung usaping kultura, right? Or when we talk about values, no? And alam naman namin, palagi namin pinag-usapan ni Jan, no? I believe in a more inclusive God, di ba? And a move towards more inclusivity, right? And I think that's where the tension lies on the church, no? Pantay magpoposisyon sa mga ganitong bagay, no? I think that's up for critical discernment.
Roz, any thoughts?
Naniniwala din ako sa Diyos na meets you where you are. Naniniwala ako sa Diyos na inklusibo. And iba-iba naman talaga yung journey natin sa buhay. And that's why I think it's the time of young people actually to shape the narrative. It's our time, it's our moment. And siguro yung during their time, that was the norm, no? That's where God met them. But I think it's the time also for God to meet the young people because there were young ones and God met them there. I think it's the moment also for really, if we're talking about rights, also to provide space for women's rights, LGBT rights. These are not the norm during their time. But I think it's now where God is meeting us. I really believe that. I was an atheist before, not because I did not believe in God, but because I hated in a way God. Kasi bakit? But when I was reading also the theology books, no, borrowed also from some of you here. Yeah, dun ko mas nakilala ang Diyos na it was not God who caused suffering. It was also people who think they are God when in fact they're not. And I believe in a God that is allowing freedom, but also allows us to use that freedom to also, correct things when hindi na siya tama. So I'm really for the church also to help us push this concepts, equality also for the least, the lost. And nakalimutan ko na yun.
The last.
Sorry.
The last, the least, and the last.
Okay, may own version ako. Ayan, yes. Pero yan, I'm not an expert in terms of the church, pero naniniwala talaga ako doon.
Yeah,
and it's the yun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sa akin lang din, no. Shucks, nakalimutan ko yung sasabihin ko. Wait, okay, mamaya na, baka maalala ko. So, well, Carlo and RM are talking, no. Napaisip ko na, sometimes, no, we are actually just limited to what is in the law, di ba? For example, parang mas pinapaboran natin yung batas compared sa tao, no? Well, at least in the side of the church, no, at least, no. But of course, at least I can say that in a way, no, that the Catholic Church, for example, no, is actually trying to widen its perspective, no, to become inclusive, di ba? Because, for example, no, other church groups or other religions would say that if you're part of the LGBTQ, you'll automatically go to hell. So yun yung there are church groups who believe in that teachings, di ba? But of course, in the church, no, we believe that although you are that, no, it's actually explicit na sinasabi doon sa ating Catholic Catechism of the Catholic Church, that being a homosexual is not actually a bad thing, no? We are still created according to the image and likeness of God, no? So yun yung at least, but of course, in terms of policies, no, the church is not yet that open, di ba? But yeah, let's speaking of church, no, dito, let's try to widen the discussion now in terms of inclusivity, no. The church churching the unchurched, no. Ano ba ibig sabihin nito, Carlo? Church in the
Ah,
unchurched. Ano yun? Church in the unchurched. Yeah.
Yes, actually interesting kasi sa kapihan session natin kahapon, no. So SLB volunteers, etc. nag-usap-usap, no. And we do new weekly news briefers kasi, no. So konteksto actually sa mga audience po namin. So SLB actually conducts kapihan sessions, no, for our community, and we prepare weekly news briefers, no. At yun actually pinapag-usapan namin ngayon dito sa radyo, no. Um And one great article, no, na nahanap namin tungkol sa simbahan was an article with the title, "What if the peripheries were really the center that defines the church today?" No? So, what if the peripheries, no, is what defines the church today, no? I remember before, medyo napag-usapan na din natin to sa previous church episodes, no, that the church is in a defensive mentality, no? Parang the idea is that you're protecting your current parishioners, we're making sure that the attendance, no, of the church is maintained, no? But in that previous discussion, nalaman natin na I think only 20% to 30%, no, of Catholics are actually those people, no, na pumupunta pa rin sa simbahan constantly, while a significant part of the church actually is not anymore participating, no, in the sacraments, or participating actively in the church, no. And yet our mentality is, let's protect our current parishioners rather than aggressively, no, moving to the peripheries and into the missionary field again to bring people back into communion, into community, etc. No? And so ipinag-usapan natin doon in the last kapihan session, no? We were raising the idea nga, the unchurched, no? Konting context, ako din nanggaling ako sa gano'n, no? Similar to RM, I was disillusioned by the church. I almost let go of my faith because I was just really frustrated with the issues, the way that the church was in a sense articulating, no, its positions on all kinds of issues, no, na parang it did not parang may contradiction yung we talk about God is love and yet hindi loving yung pronouncements natin, no. And at some point, 'di ba, parang I may still have believed in infinite being, in God, no? And yet I could not find it in the church, no? And ito yung sinasabi kong mga unchurched na mga Katoliko. And I would say that a lot of my contemporaries probably are in this space, no? Na parang ayaw na namin ng formal religion because it seems like hindi naman yan sumasagot sa mga pangangailangan ko. So I will be spiritual, no? In a sense, I will have my own belief systems that are consistent with my value system, di ba? Whether it be justice, whether it be being inclusive, etc. So I can pray to God directly. I don't exactly need a community, parang ganon, no? And I think that's very important for us to frame our conversation about the church, no? Kasi ngayon, may synodal process tayo. The promise is that we will accompany, pero ang tanong ay sino yung kasama dun sa ina-accompany natin, di ba? Are we just accompanying the people inside the church or necessarily kailangan ba, no, na pumunta talaga tayo sa mga unchurched, no, the peripheries, people who have in a sense given up on the church because of its difficult positions, 'di ba? Paano natin sila sasamahan din sa proseso, no? I think ito yung mga parang naging important questions of reflection siguro in the past. Medyo consistent siya, no, sa SLB na palagi natin ito napapag-usapan ngayon, no, very recently. No?
Yeah. Actually, ito ba lang sasabihin ko kanina? Yung mga pinag-usapan natin ngayon are actually parang merong patterns ako napapansin, di ba? If for the past episodes, pinag-usapan natin was about scandals of the church, ganyan. And then, of course, another episode, we talk about the LGBTQ rights, how the church view the LGBTQ. And then ngayon we talk about the LGBTQ, the women rights, etc. It's all surrounds with the dignity of the human person, the right to labor, no? Ganung mga bagay, you know. And then gusto ko yung sinabi ni RM kanina that there was a point in time na parang he hated God, no? Of course, why ito nangyari. And then RM said that it's not about actually God, no, permitting us, I mean, willing us to suffer, but it's actually the people, no, around us, no, who caused suffering, di ba? And I always try this, I mean, I always tell this to my, to my students. Kasi sabi ko sa kanila, actually, the reason why God is actually, the reason why there is suffering is that God gave us free will. And that free will is not actually, suffering is not actually a will of God. Suffering is actually a consequence of us having free will. No? Kasi imagine if all people are imagine if all people are here. I mean, imagine if all people are trying to do goodwill, no? Then there will be no more suffering, di ba? That's why Christ is actually trying to call us, no, to become Christ to other people, no, to become Christ to other people. Where can we read this in the scriptures, di ba? When Christ said that I was hungry but you did not give me food, I was thirsting but you did not give me clothes, I was thirsting but you did not give me water to drink, I was naked but you did not give me clothes to wear, no? So parang whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you do it unto me. So ibig sabihin, Christ wants us to become to become Christ to other people. No, we bring Christ into them. We bring the sense of love to other people. No, we bring love in a sense to other people. That's the reason why Christ created us, because God created us, no, because He was so abundant in love that He wants to share, that God wants to share love to everyone, no. So yun, no. Any thoughts, RM, no, regarding regarding, of course, I really love yung sinabi mo kanina that you have a shift, no. So baka Carlo, baka mag-i-enroll na ito si RM din, no. Aside na ipupusin niya yung paglolo niya, but 2 degrees yung
Correct.
i-enroll niya.
Doctor,
Theology.
doctor
Oo.
in law. Ay, canon lawyer pala.
Oo, di ba? We really need women theologians right now, no?
I'm okay. Okay na ako. Okay na ako speaking here for now.
Okay, sige. So yun, another,
Sige.
okay. Napapansin ko na parang yung ating mga topics ngayon are very much connected kasi yung next topic is all about human trafficking and modern slavery, no? There was a news report, no, regarding there was news report that more than 31 Filipinos may be trafficking victims in Myanmar, no? Sabi ni Senator Riza Hontiveros, no? And then estimate nila is that 31 na mga Filipinos ang nandoon pa at kailangan ma-rescue, tulad ng 12 na na-rescue niya from Myanmar, no? Ang sasabi dito is that according to Hontiveros, no, victims were said to be promised job in a call center as customer service representatives or as data encoders, but were instead kidnapped and were then forced to scam foreigners. No, the senators claim that the Chinese mafia is planning to establish a team of Filipino scammers in Myanmar. What are your thoughts of this? No, about this, Carlo? No, still no women. Rights of dignity of the human person, no, right to labor, etc.
Yeah. Well, ako siguro just some quick points on it, no. Parang yung unang reflection ko nung pinag-usapan din natin to, one, it's clearly a gender issue, no. Parang there's really issue of but I'm not saying, no, that it's just women, no, who actually end up in such scams, no, na trafficking, because there are also males also get trafficked, no. But I think the incidence for women it's much higher, no. And it's really a whole system of patriarchy, etc. But the second, I think, much more important, I think very connected to it and intertwined is something that we call commodification, no. In our economic system, and I think Pope Francis has talked about this very clearly, no, sa Evangelii Gaudium, we reduce, no, the value of people to something that can be monetarily valued, no? Meaning, ang isang tao, pwede mong sabihin, halaga niyan ay 50,000 pesos, kaya pwede siyang ibenta, no? Ganon, right? And in a sense, trafficking, di ba, to a certain extent, is modern day slavery. I think that's one of the terms na ginagamit when it comes to talking about trafficking, no? And the difficulty for it is that there is demand, no? And that's why supply is being created also, no? And but it is because in the first place, no, the human person is commodified. Pwede siyang ilagay sa market, kaya may supply and demand, no? And trafficking basically is operating under such logic, no? So insofar as it is profitable, as people make money of it, it would really be but the underlying, I think, cultural problem, no, with the question of trafficking na is yun, the idea of pwede mong ikwenta ang tao, no? Pwede mo silang ibenta, no? And I think that's the trafficking issue, right? Na if again, no, um we are creating laws, we are creating all of these things, but as fast as we are innovating in terms of social policies, ganun din katalino yung mga black market people, no? In a sense, they innovate also in terms of practices to still be able to deliver on whatever the market needs, no? And I think this is the scarier thing, di ba? Na parang ito yung sinasabi nga ni Pope Francis, ni Pope Francis consistently, no? Now we've devalued the value of a person. We have reduced them to things that can be thrown away, that can be sold, that can be put on the market, you know. And that requires a lot of detoxifying in sense, no? Parang we have to examine our values, we have to examine how we view each other as a people. We have to um, go back, no, to the framework inside us na iniisip natin, pwede yan i-exploit, no? Ay, yun yung sinasabi ni Pope, eh. There's something happening inside the human person, no, na ini-exploit natin ang isa't isa. And I think trafficking at a very fundamental level, no, is about exploitation, di ba? Parang I think yun yung kailangan natin i-tackle, no, when it comes to trafficking. And because the system is against women, no, the exploitation against women is also amplified because of this, no. Yeah. I go RM.
Yeah. Yung mga move na to sa government natin, babalik ko lang, na this is how I also see that God is moving through certain people also. And that's the reason why I went back to the church is I learned the word magis.
Wow.
So
Thank you, Jesuit.
and I think a lot of the times the word magis in the previous generation think more things, acquisition, you know. But I also see that it's actually love also that moves them to do so. Maybe love because they're so worried about their family, because we have a cold system in a way in some parts of it. But also I'm seeing also that there are people who think that more is more loving, more caring, and they offer that to others. No, so we have different manifestations, different versions of it. But the way I see it is when I saw it walking around, you know, the campus, I think really the first thought is seeing God in all things, like Magis more, seeing God also in a lot of more people. So it was people who pushed me outside of the church, but it was also people who made me believe in God again. So moves like this in the legislature actually makes me believe that there are things beyond me that are moving without my knowledge. Um, so this, mga corrective mechanisms and positive affirmations from the Pope as the leader of the church makes me believe that God is really moving right now also.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe in ways that I don't know, and maybe in ways that I can't recognize yet. But I believe that God is moving through different people also. That's why I went back to the church. And these legislations are manifestations for me that God is moving really for the least, the lost. And another L, nakalimutan ko na naman.
The last. last,
So
last.
yun. So
yeah,
that's it for me.
yeah. Actually, RM, if you ask Jesuits what's their definition of magis, each Jesuit has their own definition, but but all of them will really have one common thing, that magis is all about love talaga. No, it always goes to love. No, finding God in all things, ad maiorem Dei gloriam. No, and yeah, yun. Ano pa ba? Okay, so yun. And also, um, tawag dito. God, bakit nakakalimutan ko yung mga sasabihin ko ngayon?
Wala ka pa ata sa kape this morning,
Oo.
John. Actually, but
Do you have anything to add, Carlo?
hindi, ano lang. I think maganda na yung synthesis point ni RM ending on a more positive note, no? I think necessarily parang marami talaga tayong hinaharap, no, na masasamang bagay sa mundo, no? When we tackle the news briefs on a weekly basis sa kapihan namin, nakikita naman talaga natin, no, na maraming kailangan pang gawin. Pero maganda yung punto na sinasabi ni RM na kahit sa ganitong hirap, kahit sa mga ganitong mga issue na hinaharap natin bilang bansa, no, the oppressions, etc., no, pwede naman natin masabi pa rin, no, that somehow the Lord is moving towards revealing these socially unjust structures, correcting these socially unjust structures, and inspiring people to do something, no, about this hindi mga bagay na hindi makatarungan, no. I think yun siguro yung necessary na magandang balikan natin bilang mga Kristiyano, no, na importante ito yung mga issue, pero mas importante naniniwala tayo na nandiyan yung Diyos, gumagalaw siya through us and inside a church that is not perfect, but the Holy Spirit is still with us, no? And I think that's where we have to, very positive, no? Actually, ready na talaga si RM ata mag-degree, no? Pwede na eh. Diyan, hindi nga tayo sure kung pumasa tayo sa ano natin.
Comms natin, di ba? Yeah, ito, naalala ko na ganyan naging sasabihin ko. Kasi sinabi ni RM kanina that it was people who pushed me away from the church, but it was also people who pulled me back, diba? There's actually a prayer in the mass there, in the pre-fast now. Sinabi ko to kay Carlo, diba? That in the pre-fast, there was a portion there na sinasabi that mas gusto ko siya in Bisaya eh. So Bisaya, ito siya sa Bisaya. Ang tao mismo mo ay nagpahilayo kanako. Ang tao mismo ay nagpahilayo namo kanimo, apan ang tao mismo ang nagpahiuli ni ini pinaagi ni Jesucristo nga among ginawa. In English it means it was man, it was Adam. Man, no, man talaga, pero hindi niya sinabi na Adam with a small m. It was man who broke our bond, but it was also man with a capital M in the person of Jesus Christ who brings back our relationship. No? So bringing that context in the present day, no, if it was actually the church who pulled the people away from the church, maybe it will also be the church who can bring back those people who went away from the church. No? So yun, the church at least is unity in diversity. No, for example, maraming mga traditionalists, marami tayong mga progressives. No, pero hopefully, no, there is still, we will draw people back to the church, no. Time check, 5 minutes, 5 minutes late na tayo. Sobrang dami natin na pag-usapan ngayon. And again, thank you so much, RM, no. Nag-chat sa akin si Roslyn Balmes, no. Roslyn Balmes, OMI, no. Hindi niya tayo,
Correct.
hindi niya tayo pinabayaan. Nanonood siya ngayon. Sabi niya, please tell Razel that I miss her and I want to hug her. No? So yun yung chat niya sa akin. No? Thank you very much, RM and Carlo, for joining our program this morning. No?
Salamat.
Muli, no,
Thank you.
ako po si John Warren Barquez, and happy lunch everyone. No? Thank you very much for joining our program.
Palalimin ang kamalayan sa mga isyong napapanahon. Makisangkot at makiisa kasama ang Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan, ang socio-political apostolate ng Kapisanan ni Jesus. Ito ang Kuwentuhang Bayan mula alas 11 ng umaga tuwing Biyernes dito lang sa Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. Dahil naniniwala kami na posible ang isang mas mabuting lipunan at maaari itong simulan sa isang kwentuhan.
Radyo